The next thing we're going to look at is seedlings. Quite a number of the seedlings which you sowed last month will have germinated and will be ready for the next stage, which is to prick them out and pop them on into larger pots. Some that you've sown earlier might be quite a good size, and rather than disturb the roots, it might be possible to leave them in their growing pots and then transplant them straight outside in 2 or 3 weeks' time, end of May, early June. But for those which have been sown and are still quite small, you're going to want to pot them on. We're just going to take a look at that now. Now this year, because I've had time, I've grown a lot of things from seed, including various flowering plants and vegetables, and just want to look at some issues about growing from seed and pricking out. The first thing that you might notice straight away is that this is a tray of a form of lettuce. Here, they're not very good, and that's bad watering on my part, because when the seedlings at the very edge of the tray dry out the soonest, so they've had less water to produce less sturdy plants. Conversely, I did the opposite with some cucumbers. I overwatered them, and cucumbers, courgettes and squashes are really sensitive when they're seedlings to being overwatered, and I lost 2 out of 3 plants. As they get bigger, they need a lot of water, but at that stage when they're seedlings, you have to be careful. And the other interesting thing, and I have done this deliberately for once, is to show about sowing with fine seed. Parsley is quite fine seed, and here I've managed to sow it really sparingly, so these are going to be easy to pot on. Here I've not sown it so sparingly, and this shows with fine seed the difficulties if you don't sow it. So don't sow fine seed straight from the packet, put it on your hand and then pick it out and just drop it carefully, because these, as we'll see in a minute, will be much more difficult to prick out without damaging the adjacent plants because they're crowded in together. These radishes, you can use pretty well anything for sowing seeds. This is, I think, a punnet of a fruit punnet, but they've been sown quite well spaced, and that means they'll be very easy to transplant. And I probably will take these, leave them in here for another couple of weeks or so, and then I'll put these straight out into the veg plot. The parsley, I probably won't, I'll transplant that. So this was just a bit of pruning, but what a good shape that is. So you don't need any fancy gadgets. So to take something out, to prick it out, what you need to do is to get right underneath it, so that here you get underneath right at the bottom, so that you're easing the seedling up by its roots, and its roots are very variable. So once you've loosened them, you should be able, this is a bit, let's push it up a bit further. Once you've loosened the roots, you'll be able to pull out the individual plants, not by the roots. Make a little hole, pot it in there, and I'll probably pot 2 or 3 in there because it's a reasonable sized pot. See, they're separating good roots. Make a nice deep hole for it and pot it into there. Now that's quite easy. I'll just tuck these back in for a minute now so that they don't dry out too much. But here, where they're very congested, this is going to be much more tricky because it's very much more difficult to separate plant from its neighbouring plant, which you need to do to prick it out. They need to be planted individually, and that's more difficult because they're all a bit too congested. So we'll do that when I've got some time later, but the theory there is when you're sowing seeds, sow it as finely as you can. And I haven't actually got one to show you. I usually do have one. It's a weedy seedling. If you've got a weedy seedling, that's one where you've got a sort of elongated stem. What you can do when you pot it up, instead of potting it up at soil level, take the hole right down to the bottom and sink the seedling in deep and cover it up so that less of the neck is above the soil, and that will help it recover, and you'll find it will grow into quite a sturdy seedling, even though it might look a bit weedy. So that's all about seedlings.